Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel iDeea. My name is Deea. Today we are going to talk about my favorite reads in 2024. So I had a hard time narrowing this down. I did not have very many 5-star, 90% or above for me, and preferably 95% or above is what I would call a 5-star. And I really didn't have very many of those this year. So there were several that were almost 5-star, and there were some that were like very close to that 90 percentile line. But I have narrowed it down to 10, and I am going to, it's actually 11, because the bottom one is kind of tied, and I'll explain that. But excuse all the background noise if you hear a bunch of background noise. The dishwasher is going, my daughter is in the shower, the dryer is going, but I had to get this done. And so I just wanted to make sure that I get this out to you guys on a timely basis. So here we go. Favorite fiction reads. I should say that because I think I'm going to do a nonfiction list. So I'm going to do them separately. We're not going to talk about them today. This is just fiction. Without further ado, let's do it. Number 10 spot is a tie. And the reason that this is a tie is because I had such a wonderful experience reading one of these books. It didn't end the way that I would have preferred that it end, but it was still such a positive, wonderful experience that I cannot help but put this in my top reads of the year. And the other one that it tied with is such a good story and so much fun and was completely unexpected and so well written. So the two that have tied are The Antiquary by Sir Walter Scott and The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. The Vicar of Wakefield is about a vicar and his family and the perseverance and loyalty that they have to one another and to God, and the way that they embrace all of life as it comes. And it was so funny and also poignant, and I just loved it. I read it with Stephanie and Tiffany, and I cannot wait to read more with them, and I hope that whatever we read next is just as fun and just as wonderful of an experience. Neither one of them probably rated it as highly as I did, but I don't care. The experience of reading it with them, the conversations that we had, it was just wonderful. The Antiquary is about an older man who welcomes somebody into his family, and he's quite eccentric, and yet he has so much to offer and so much to give, and the young man just loves him and accepts him as he is. And there's a little bit of a love story that's kind of woven in there. I'm not going to talk too much about that. And it was just so unexpectedly wonderful. And so these two are tied for number 10. It's the only tie I have. So the next one is The Lantern of Lost Memories. This is a translated fiction. I'm going to put a picture of it up. So this was not something I expected either. And it also wasn't something I expected to stick with me. So I think originally I gave this a lower score overall, And I went back and changed it a month later because it was just not letting go. And so it's the story of this kind of halfway point after you die or you're about to die, and you go into one of these camera shops, and in those camera shops are pictures of your entire life, and you are supposed to choose a photo from each year, and they are put into a lantern, and then you get to experience it. And sometimes that sends people back to their life ready to live it more fully, and sometimes that sends them off into the other world ready to move on and be thankful and be full. And it has some very poignant twists in this story, and it's a little tiny book, and you don't expect it to be as deep. And the people that come in and the way that they are connected and the way that it all ties back together at the end just has not left me. And so this one has to be a favorite of the year as well. Number 8, again, something I totally did not expect to like near as much as I did. And that is Contact by Carl Sagan. So interesting and just made me think. Just a lot of grappling with faith and grappling with beliefs and what we believe and why we believe it, and why some things are easier to believe than others, and what is it about believing in things unseen that is so difficult sometimes and so easy at other times. And so anyway, it also is about relationship and community, and it has some garbage in it. Don't get me wrong. It has some things in it that I just went, oh, I wish that wasn't there. But for the most part, this was a book that, again, just did not leave me. And I have continued to mull it over and think about it and just fall in love with different aspects of it that I wasn't in love with at the beginning. And yeah, it's wonderful. Now we are on to the next book, is Willa Cather's collected stories. I read 5 of these, and that is because my buddy reader, the book that she had only had those 5 in it. And so this has many more in it, and we're going to read some more this year. But the 5 that I read, there was one I didn't like. There was one that was just, kind of on the edge, but for the most part, these were all just lovely. I love Willa Cather's writing. I don't always love the way that she ends something. I don't always love her characters. Sometimes they really tick me off. But 9 times out of 10, she's going to be somebody that I do not forget. And I loved these stories. So this is coming in at number 7 on my favorites of the year. I think I told you this was going to be on my end of the year favorites. I was pretty sure. I have Lilies of the Field by William Barrett. This is teeny tiny, and it is so powerful. I just thought this was an incredible, amazing little story. So we are with a man who has been a soldier, and he has fought in the war, served his time, the war is over, he is home, his soldier's pay comes in, he buys a vehicle and begins to travel around the western half of the United States. In traveling around, he comes across a set of nuns who are rebuilding a nunnery or a mission in Colorado. And he pulls over because he's been, as he travels around, just doing kind of handyman kind of work. And so he thinks that he'll do a good deed for an afternoon, and he pulls over and asks the nuns if he can help them. The relationship between the head nun, what do they call it? Mother Superior, and the man, so fun. It's silly at times. It is really close to home at times. I just loved it. This beautiful story of friendship and community and what that looks like when you're willing to be open to whatever comes your way. And yeah, great little book. Next, another sci-fi. So I had some great sci-fi reads this year. I am usually not much of a sci-fi reader, and this year I just had so many wonderful sci-fi reads. So the next one on my list is Isaac Asimov's The Bicentennial Man. This book has other stories in it. It's just The Bicentennial Man that I have read in this collection. And it's on the cover here. Again, a story about what it means to be a good human, especially when you aren't human, and why it's desirous to be human, and just all of these questions that are grappled with and wrestled with in this story. And it's just done beautifully. And I absolutely fell in love with the family in here, with the Bicentennial Man, with all of these other events and emotions and all of this that happen in this little tiny short story. And gosh, I just loved it. Next is a book I do not own, but I hope to in the future, and that is James by Percival Everett. I don't know very many end of the year lists of anyone who read this book that this book is not on their top list. It was impactful, it was poignant, it was hard, it was so beautifully told, and I just have not been able to let it go since I read it. I love the way that Percival Everett retold Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I love that he came at it from Jim's perspective, who is James, as the titular character, and that he did not hold back, that he didn't give us what we would have expected, that he really took it beyond just the surface and dove deep into this man's heart, into his psyche, into the plight of the slaves in that day and age, it was just so wonderful. Little twist at the end, which I also absolutely loved. It was so good. It was so good. Another short book. None of the books on my list are very long, with the exception of one, and that is the next one. Number 3 on my list is Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. I spent October, November, and December reading the 3 books that make up Kristin Lavransdatter, and I read them with Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia. And I, in the first book, thought, no, this isn't going to be a book that I like. This isn't for me. And then we got to book 2, and I was blown away. I was suddenly thrust into a depth of character and into a landscape, both political and literal, that were vibrant and alive, and the characters are raw and human and beautifully told. And by the end of book 3, I didn't want it to stop. It was fascinating. It was hard. It was beautiful. There is every genre that you can imagine wrapped up in this book. The fantasy elements are more like the myth that was believed, and ghosts and fairies and Norse gods, all of that kind of thing that kind of play into the underbelly of 14th century Norway, enchanting, encompassing. It captured me. It was, so much about this that I loved. The first book is the reason why it's not higher on the list for me. And that's probably an unpopular opinion. I'm sure that for others, the first book was their favorite. If it would have just been book 1, it wouldn't even be on my list. It's because of book 2 and 3 that it stays as a favorite in my heart. Number 2 on my list. And this was my very first read of 2024. And it was such an amazing way to begin the year. This is Augustus by John Williams. And this was not something that I expected to like. I love ancient history, don't get me wrong, but this is a fictional work, and it's not a fictional work of something that I thought I was really that interested in, the Caesars, basically. And yet I was totally submersed in this story. It is told in letters and journals and speeches and all of that kind of thing, as well as prose. And goodness, it's a huge cast of characters, and I had zero trouble keeping them straight because their voices were so distinct, and the story was so tightly written, so focused. And again, a book that just has not left me alone since I finished it. I have thought about this so much. I already want to reread it. I loved it. Typical to Greek and Roman history, there's a lot of crap that happened. A lot of things that we would look at today and say, how dare they, or look at today and say, yeah, that is wrong. But it was another day, another age, and it's the way that it happened. And I want to know that and be thankful that it's not that way any longer. But man, I wish I could have known him. All right, Augustus, John Williams. I think I told you at the time I finished this that it was probably going to be on my top books of the year. I didn't talk too much about it, partly because I was still processing it, I think. But anyway, it is Children of My Heart by Gabrielle Wah. This I read in November with my friend Sandra, and I was not prepared for how emotional this book was going to be. It did everything under the sun to my emotions. It had me laughing. It had me wanting to weep. It had me angry and frustrated at times. I love the teacher and the voice of that teacher in this little novel. I believe Gabrielle Wah based this on her own life and her own experiences in teaching, but it is a work of fiction. She tells it through students. So it's short stories based at different schools with different students during the year or years that she's at that school. And on the, I want to say Manitoba Prairie. I'm not positive if Manitoba is the right province or not, but it takes place in little prairie schools for the most part. It's so good. It is so good. You fall in love with the children. You fall in love with her. You wrestle through things with her. You wrestle through things with the kids. You cheer when she has a victory. It's beautiful. And Gabrielle Wah has this way of just placing you into the story where you are experiencing every single thing along with the characters. She just writes the reader in a way that I've never experienced before. I just loved it. Sandra, you have to tell me in the comments if this was one of your favorite books of the year as well. I can't imagine me not rereading this. It's going to happen. It'll probably happen within the next year and a half. So there you go. My number one fictional read of the year. So that is everything, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Have you read any of these books? I would love to know your thoughts on them if you have read them. I think that, you know, putting James as number 4 is probably going to be a little controversial. I just am so thankful to have had these beautiful, beautiful reads. I will talk to you again very soon. We will have a nonfiction best of, and then of course I've got my worst of. I still have my December wrap up. So we'll be doing all of that very soon. Bye.